Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Today is Thursday, September 8th of 2022, and we still have some folks joining. Okay. And we are happy to have our hybrid meeting set up here tonight with folks there at the labs, TXRX labs, and folks online. So this is great. So for folks online, you can put questions in the chat at any time, and we'll get to those. But a couple different things here in September. First of all, besides this meeting right now, this is traditionally our National Drive Electric Week month, and that will happen starting on the 23rd of this month and going for a little over a week, covering 2 weekends. And we here in Houston have selected Saturday, the 24th, to have our ENDU event, and it will be at Condit Elementary in Bel Air. And thanks again to Steve Hanrahan for doing a lot of work to set that up, and other folks too. And it'll be real exciting. So I would suggest that everybody look at the website driveelectricweek.org, and if you put in your zip code, it'll find you the one for Houston. I think the next closest is like Waco or something like that. So we'd like to see as many folks who are interested in coming out as possible. We've done a couple of different locations over the years, and we found that the elementary school works great, and hopefully we'll get good participation this year as well. And I don't know if he's in the room, but I'd like to welcome Professor Curtis Davis and his students. And he's tied to U of H and also is a lecturer at Rice University. So we'll catch up with them. If anybody there in the room sees them, you can say hi to them. And the other big news in addition to ENDU, National Drive Electric Week, is what is happening with our chapter. We have traditionally been called the Houston Electric Auto Association, and our national organization has renamed itself from Auto to Vehicle. So it is the Electric Vehicle Association. So we are now the Houston Electric Vehicle Association. So our websites, we're in the process of moving those things over. You should be able to go to heaa.org, but our new official website is houstoneva.org, and what that will do is send you off to the page of the national site that is dedicated to Houston. And you should be able to find information there once we get really revved up about our monthly meetings on the second Thursday of every month, and then also special events such as National Drive Electric Week. And in December, we will be planning our traditional family get-together, that is all family members of members. We'd like to welcome everybody to come out, probably be at Claiborne Cafeteria again, and everybody can get together with a little holiday spirit and such. So those are events coming up. Also, in addition to our website, you can go to the Facebook group that is dedicated to the Houston Electric Vehicle Association. And that way you can see what's going on as well. So, and today I'm really excited to have Buzz back again, Buzz, the EV evangelist. And so we're going to hear from him. Probably a lot of us have been on the property of a car dealership before. And of course, this is a huge transition, 100 years of selling gasoline cars, and all of a sudden, wow, got to do something different. You need some different education, different equipment, things like that. And so Buzz is going to tell us about that. So Colin or anybody, if you can't think of any other announcements, we will turn it over to Buzz, and we will have Q&A at the end, and then we'll talk about some other things. All right, Buzz, take it away.
All right. Well, the one thing that's been consistent in the 10 years that I've been driving electrically is that the EV buying experiences at dealerships is terrible. And, even from the early years, that was one of the big complaints that would come up on Facebook. Oh, I know more than the car salesman does. And I've been doing some digging, and I can tell you who's to blame for this. And it's you, the EV buyers. You ask too many questions, and that's the problem. So let's get into this a little bit. The dealers have gotten a lot of blame for not wanting to sell EVs. And believe it or not, the dealers don't really get to pick what sells and what doesn't sell. It's those salespeople that determine this or not. And so I know in the early years, like in the Chevy Volt, you could go onto a Chevy dealership and say, hey, I'd like to take a look at the Chevy Volt. And they go, oh, you don't want the Volt. You want the Cruise. It's basically the same car, but you don't have that big battery pack. So it's a lot cheaper. And they'd actually try to talk you into a gasoline powered car. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is basically human. No one wants to seem uninformed about what they do for a living, and so they don't want you to ask them a question that they don't know the answer to. So their quick answer back then, since EVs were around 1% of their sales, was just to start talking to you about something they did understand and not waste time learning about something that they'd hardly get to employ in their day-to-day living. So, the EV buyers come in, they ask a lot of questions, and most of them are lifestyle questions that you can't be taught in a normal car dealership training class. You're going to ask things like, well, how much is it going to change my electric bill every month? How long does it take to charge? What's this level 1, level 2 DC fast charging? Can I get a DC fast charger in my house? Am I going to have the wiring in my house modified? So all these questions, unless you've been driving an EV, just are overwhelming. And you compound that with a problem based on how they're compensated. So these salespeople are 100% commission. That means if they sell a car, they make money. If they don't sell a car, they don't make any money. And it's become a science, auto sales has, and they've done all of these surveys, and they can tell you that the average car buyer back in the gasoline car days would go to 1.4 dealerships before they pulled the trigger and bought a car. Well, that's huge for the salesperson. That means they've got more than a 50-50 chance that when they meet you, they're going to sell you a car. Now, in the case of the EV world, and this is from my 6 years experience selling them, the EV buyer would come in and talk to me for an hour with a lot of questions. And then they would leave and go home and think up more questions and come in, say, a week later. And if I'm lucky, they would find me. If I wasn't, they would find somebody else. And guess what? If they bought that car from somebody else, all the time I spent with them was just wasted. I made $0, and whoever came in behind me, and maybe they didn't have any answers to questions, but I had given you enough information that you went home, thought about it, thought, well, I'll buy that car. And then you didn't come back to me. So it got to where this was very discouraging for the car people, and they didn't want anything to do with EV buyers. And so even at my dealership, and we were one of the most successful traditional dealerships selling electric vehicles, salespeople, as soon as you brought up that you wanted a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, they go, oh, go talk to that guy and point at me and say he can answer your questions. They didn't want anything to do with it, even when it was a layup sale. Now, it is true that car dealership service departments are very nervous because, well, like the dealership I worked for, over $9 million a year in service was done at that dealership. So it's a big profit center for the dealership. Again, you may not know this, but all those people that work on your car are probably commission based. So when they come back and say, we really need to replace your Flamistam, and you're thinking, well, I've never even heard of a Flamistam before. This seems like I'm getting ripped off. You actually might be. They need you to buy something else to up their commissions. So they really love this idea in the automotive industry. It's every person there is like their own little business. So every mechanic, every salesperson has their own little store, and they're selling you their wares. And it's capitalism, at its most brash, and people really love that lifestyle, but it's just not going to work in the electric world. So you go onto a dealership lot and you tell them you want to buy a pickup, and they're going to say, okay, crew cab, double cab, regular cab, long bed, short bed, 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive. Do you want the 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, or 8-cylinder? And here's the horsepower, the torque, and the miles per gallon for each of those engines. And at that point, they just want to know what color you want, and you'll walk out there and buy one. And within an hour, they're ready to move on to that next salesperson. And they made a pretty good commission for doing that. Now, when you go in to buy an EV and you start asking these questions, if the salesman can't palm you off on somebody else, they quickly want you to stop asking questions. And you may have experienced this to your benefit, but the price starts dropping pretty quickly. And very quickly, they get to where there's almost no profit left. They just want to get you to shut up and buy the car and leave so that they can go on to something that's more profitable. Well, of course, if there's almost no profit in the deal, whatever their commission rate times that almost no profit is almost no pay for them. So they get a bad taste in their mouth and they don't want anything to do with that world ever again. So when we ask them to learn about EVs, EVs, we're asking them to take longer to do their job because they're selling an EV, to make a smaller income because commissions on EVs are typically lower. So that calculates out to being a lower hourly rate of pay. And if we were to go into your office where you work and said, hey, we need you to do the same job. Actually, we need you to work a little harder, but we're going to have to cut your pay in half while you do it. But it's for the good of the dealership. You're probably going to tell them to take a hike. And that's the way these salespeople have reacted up until now. Now, salespeople love on their business cards to say that they're a sales consultant, but they're not. These days, they are sales clerks. They know their inventory inside and out. They can take you right to the car that you're looking for. But most of us have been driving gasoline cars for years, if not decades. And gasoline cars, as we were talking about earlier, they've been in production for over 100 years. Most of us don't really have any questions other than what's the monthly payment going to be? What kind of miles per gallon are we going to get? And how fast is the thing? And do I like the way it looks? Then Tesla comes along and most people would buy a car without ever having seen it, much less sat inside of it or test driven it. A completely new idea that everybody was sure was going to fail. And then Tesla dominated electric vehicle sales. And what they did was they took the model of my previous employer, Apple, and basically made an Apple store for cars. So you go in, you can ask as many questions as you want because the salespeople aren't paid on a commission structure. They're just salaried salespeople. They've got all day to chew the fat about EVs with you if that's what you want to do. So there's no sales pressure there. It's an educational environment, just the way the Apple store was. And just the way Apple stores became super popular, Tesla stores became super popular. And then you've got Rivian, Fisker, Canoo, Lordstown, all these new vehicle manufacturers are going to sell in the same way. And now we've got the world of traditional gasoline car manufacturers who are moving into the electric world. Some, like GM, have even set a date that, after this date, we're not going to have any more gasoline powered vehicles. And they've got a harder time, believe it or not, selling EVs than anyone else does because they can't run off their gasoline business before the EV business is big enough to replace it. So they've got to keep their dealers satisfied. They've got to keep everything going smoothly. But at the same time, they're seeing that the dealers are becoming less and less valuable to them. They're contributing less and less to the actual sales process and are providing no value add for the customers. And every now and then you'll see a company like Ford and GM have both done this. They've seen that the dealers are charging over MSRP, and there will be more on this in just a little bit, but they're charging over MSRP, sometimes $10,000 for an EV. For a high-end sports car, say a Corvette, sometimes it's I've seen $40,000 for a very high-end Corvette over MSRP. And there are people out there that want the car so badly, they're willing to pay that. And the rest of us just get shoved to the back of the line. Well, the dealers, again, they've got to keep these gasoline sales going until the ICE sales or the EV sales come through. They see that their corporation is getting a bad reputation because of the dealerships, which are not part of their corporation. You may or may not realize that, but your local Chevy or Ford dealer is not part of General Motors or Ford. They're just a resale shop that sells that particular company's products. And just like you can't have price fixing in any other industry, you can't in the auto sales industry. So Ford and GM will send out a letter to the dealer saying, if you charge over MSRP, we're not going to let you sell our cars anymore, or we're not going to ship you inventory anymore. And then the dealership associations get together and they start pushing back against the OEMs, and the OEMs, again, need the dealerships, and the dealerships need the OEMs for now. Now, the OEMs have another problem. They know that the sales consultants are the problem, but they can't figure out how to train them. And it's so easy. When I sold cars, I sold Chevys. So I had to sell the gasoline powered vehicles just like the electric vehicles to make a living. Whatever somebody wanted to buy, I wanted to sell them. But I guarantee you that EVs came up in every conversation because everybody wants what an EV has. Everybody wants great acceleration, low cost of maintenance, high MPGe in this case, great handling, quiet, luxurious ride, all these things that an EV provides. So why can't you sell them just like any other car? Well, the problem is you can't train the salespeople that way. If you sat down with a salesperson and went through level 1, level 2, level 3 charging, kilowatt hours on your electric bill, and then how to calculate what makes it into the car's battery, and therefore what kind of real miles per gallon equivalent are they getting, the dollar miles per gallon that people cares about, that's just going to go right over their heads. They're going to tune you out. And as soon as that class is over, they're going to go look for somebody that wants to buy gasoline powered pickup. So the old methods of training just aren't going to work in this case because it's too much memorization. And an easy solution for this is for them to, instead of just giving demo vehicles to the managers at the car dealership, they should pick a salesperson that seems to be going after EVs and let him have an EV for a month, maybe 2 months. Let them charge it at the dealership so they don't have to worry about installing a charger at home or anything. But very quickly, your sales consultant will learn the answers to all the questions that all the EV buyers come in with because they'll have been living that life. And believe it or not, I just heard today that one of the OEMs, it looks like, has a program similar to this. I've been screaming for this for years, but it looks like one of the OEMs is starting to head down this road. And what'll happen is the rest of the industry will see that all of a sudden their salespeople are really getting to be effective at selling EVs. Well, what are they doing differently? And the world will be changing. So you can't use old sale methods for a new product. The other thing is that from the very beginning, we made EVs political. The big mistake was when President Obama went to the Chevrolet plant that made the Volt and actually sat in the car and let them take a picture of him in that car. At that point, Rush Limbaugh, and I wrote about this back in 2012, but at that point, Rush Limbaugh just went ape on the Chevy Volt. He started saying it would just burst into flames for no reason, that you could only drive 40 miles and then you had to stop and charge overnight, even though it was a plug-in hybrid. So that's when the misinformation got started, is for some reason, conservative news outlets saw EVs as being a liberal thing. And all the marketing became climate change, the environment. And what I found as a car salesperson is you got to go back to sales 101. You got to start talking to your customer and learn who they are and what's important to them instead of making assumptions. And early on, I was the stupid salesperson that would make an assumption. Oh, you're looking at an EV, you must care about the environment. And I would have some people say, oh, this is that liberal climate change crap, I'm out of here, and just turn around and leave the dealership. And so we've come to think of EVs as being a liberal thing, and it's not. Both sides have something to benefit from here. If you look at what conservatives seem to care about, they talk about national security. Well, we don't have to bow down to a regime who will take a Wall Street Journal journalist and chop them up with a chainsaw because they've got their hand on the oil spigot. We don't have to watch as Russia cuts off the gas to Europe as they're getting ready to go into autumn and soon winter and basically freeze people out of their homes, weaponizing their oil and gas industry. We all want to get away from that. Well, that's a national security issue. They also care about supposedly bringing American jobs back to our country. Well, the way the latest infrastructure bill was written, a lot of vehicles that used to qualify for that $7,500 income tax credit don't anymore. For instance, Kia. Not a single Kia EV is made in the United States right now. So they're not going to get the full $7,500. Well, wait and see. I'll bet you Kia opens a plant here. But already multiple battery manufacturers are announcing new plans for plants being built in the United States, chip manufacturing, because the chip industry has hurt the automotive industry so badly and the supply chains got to be so long. Now we're finally going to start making integrated circuits back in the United States again. More of those factories are coming back. So you can talk about jobs when you're talking about them. The importance of this is you as an EV advocate are out there and your friends are asking, what do you think about your car? Don't assume that they care about the environment. Don't assume that they're not conservative and think that climate change is completely bogus. Find out what they care about cars and talk about that. Almost no one buys a car to save the planet, but they do buy them if they think they're great looking. They do buy them if they're thinking it's a hoot to drive. And that's what we all need to focus on. And I love that you guys are going to do National Drive Electric Week. I hope you have the ability to at least set up a ride area where you can get people who've never ridden in an EV before, get them in your front passenger seat and have an acceleration lane, punch that car to the floor and watch these people's smiles get bigger than their head. And they will definitely think about an EV the next time they come up. Now, there's something else going on behind the scenes, and I found out about this because I work closely with a lot of the dealer associations. But it used to be that you went into a dealership and they would sell to you at invoice. Mr. Customer, we're selling you our car at our cost. Well, invoice wasn't their cost. Invoice was supposed to be their cost, but there were backdoor ways that more of that car's cost could be paid by the OEM. And it was volume discounts. You know, if the dealership hits a certain number of cars sold in a month, then all the cars that they sold get an additional discount to the dealership that doesn't go on to the customer. It just helps the commission be a little bit better. The dealership made a little bit better profit. Well, nowadays, invoice and dealer cost have become the same thing, but we've spent the last 30 years training customers to expect at least a 10% discount or they're getting ripped off. So now when people are charging MSRP, people are pushed back by that. And if they charge over MSRP, well, those damn dealers are rascals. You know, how can we allow this to happen? And it's just that the dealerships or the OEMs are squeezing the dealers to possibly try to get them to behave better and learn about EVs, but also maybe to discourage them from staying in the business. Cadillac offered a buyout of any Cadillac dealer who did not want to make the move into the electric world, because Cadillac has announced they're going 100% electric. 30% of their dealers accepted the deal and got bought out rather than spend the money for training their service people, training their salespeople, new equipment they were going to have to buy to be able to work on EVs. They just said, you know what, I'm done with Cadillac. Now, most of those dealers are probably rural and they probably sell very few Cadillacs every year. They sell a lot more GMCs. So out in rural areas, you'll see multiple brands all under the same roof, and they're just fine with letting Cadillac go. Buick just announced a buyback program this last week. So Buick's going to do the same thing. They're going 100% electric. They're offering buyouts to their dealers, and we'll wait and see, but I'll bet you the numbers will be similar. At least 30% of these dealers will decide to just get out of the business. Well, that kind of moves us towards a Tesla-like buying experience. The dealerships may get away from having all that revenue. You won't see acres and acres of cars anymore because there are added inventory expenses for that. There are cars that have to be sold below cost when they're just not selling. The Chevy Trax was an example of that. There were times of the year that just nobody was buying these cars, and we would end up selling them below cost. The salespeople's commission is what we called a mini. You would make a straight $100 commission, and that was it, which in the car sales world is just a joke. Nobody can make a living that way. Typically, a person in a fairly large car dealership is going to sell a little over 100 cars a year. So if you're making $100 profit on each one that goes in your pocket, that's $10,000 a year. That's less than minimum wage, so you can't make it. GM has come up now with an idea of an information center. It's all virtual, it's online, but it's like you're walking around a showroom and people come up to you and you can ask them questions without actually going to the dealership. So they know they'll have people that truly understand EVs answering your questions. So we don't get that this salesperson knew less than I knew complaint anymore. But again, it's taking that control of the deal out of that salesperson's hands, out of that dealership environment, and moving the industry towards a Tesla like buying experience. I was really hoping dealers could pull through. At the very end of my career, when I got my first plug-in vehicle, I went to work for the dealer because I wanted to talk to people about EVs. I hated car sales. I tried to hang on to my cars for 10 years. I hated the buying experience so much. But once I became a car salesperson, I met really honorable people that did this for a living. They weren't ripping off their customers. I worked for a very honorable dealership that never charged, even today, does not charge over MSRP. So I know there are good people in that industry, and they've built our country for the last 120 years. But we don't mourn the people who used to make typewriters and word processors, or buggy whip manufacturers, or the people that had the stables downtown and put our horses up overnight and oiled the wheels on our wagons. Those industries all fell by the wayside. And the same thing's going to happen here. I personally have come to believe that dealerships have a 5-year window to survive. If they can't provide a service that's valuable to the customers, then the OEMs will move everybody to a Tesla-like buying experience, and car dealerships will possibly go away. Now, the bad side of that is if I'm taking a cross-country trip in my EV and I break down in some little farm town, I sure hope somebody in that town can work on my car and I don't have to tow it to the next major city, which might be 150 miles away. So we need those service locations out there. We need revenue for those people so that they can stay in business. But I think we're going to see drastically fewer salespeople working in that industry pretty soon. And right now, they have a lot of turnover. You have a bad quarter, you're fired. You go find another job at another dealership, probably selling a different brand. So you learn their cars, but really not. And you're just selling again. You're just pressuring people to buy cars, throwing in extras that they may or may not want, and the usual car sales game that we all hate. So we're seeing possibly the death of a major industry that has major political clout in each of the states. You know that Tesla can't be sold in Texas. They have a factory here. The power that these dealership associations have is going to wane because we need the factory jobs that battery plants, EV manufacturing facilities are going to bring to the various states. And we're competing over these now. We got Tesla. Georgia ended up getting the second Rivian plant, even though Fort Worth was in the running. But that's what's going to turn politicians away from the dealers associations and towards the OEMs, because the OEMs are the ones that are going to really provide economic input to the state. Now, who could help in all this? Well, I've mentioned you guys. EV clubs are phenomenal for spreading the word. Just be very careful how you do it. We want to be politically neutral so that we're not running anybody off that might end up getting an EV. And I sold a lot of EVs to a lot of conservative people, so it can be done. But you guys are the front lines, and anytime you can do a ride and drive event, National Drive Electric Week, Earth Day, things like that, y'all do great at that. Who else is out there? Well, somebody that's really going to benefit from this revolution are the electric utilities. And I met with an electric utility today, and I'm begging them, take some of the workload off the dealership salesperson's shoulders. Don't make that person become the person that has to do all the education for the customer. We could have electric utilities all pool resources, make a great educational website that's engaging for whatever your learning model is. I hate to watch video. I like to read. Other people like to watch videos. We need all of the data presented in all the ways we can. We need those myths busted, because people that are out there in the oil and gas industry, for instance, they're out there just publishing stuff that's a lie. They'll show this giant strip mine and say, hey, EV drivers, how do you feel about this? This is the world's largest lithium mine. Well, no, it's the world's largest copper mine, but they say it's a lithium mine just to slam EVs and make people who are on the fence thinking, do I like an EV or not like an EV? Well, if they hear it's terrible for the environment and they're doing this huge strip mine, even though oil and gas is typically a lot worse, they might back off. So we really need to get the electric utilities on board to provide education materials both online and on video screens at the dealerships. When you buy your electric vehicle, you ought to be able to buy the charger right there in the parts department. You ought to be able to sign up for an electric plan from a company that has a time of use plan so that you can get really low rates if you charge your car, say, starting at 11 o'clock at night. You know, all of us could do that. Our cars come with a timer built in, but who's going to do it? We all have gotten spoiled. I'm one of them. I get home, I plug it in, it starts charging. I don't worry about it. I've got solar panels on the roof. I'm thinking, well, I've done my fair share, but even I should be charging late at night when there's no stress on the grid. And get this, the electric utilities have told me they don't worry about the grid. They have tons of extra capacity at night that they can't sell. And the wind turbines, actually, they turn the blades more flat so that the fan won't spin very much because they don't want them to generate a lot of electricity, because up until now, they haven't had industry level energy storage. So if they generated the electricity, it was just going to go to ground anyways. They've got all this capacity at night that they're dying to sell. They just need a market that needs to buy at night. EVs are the match made in heaven. And if the electric utilities, the dealerships, and the OEMs will get together, I think they can really do a great deal for helping dealerships survive this change and help all of us as EV buyers get the information we need, because we're not going to get it at the dealership. But like I mentioned, dealerships could sell the electric plans for the utilities. And you know what almost always came up in my customers' conversation 6 months to a year after they got their first EV? They would start asking me about my solar panels. And none of us know reputable companies to buy solar panels from other than Tesla. You know, we all know Tesla sells solar panels. They're booked months into the future. If I want solar panels right away, all of them are these little bitty companies that come and go. You don't know who's going to stay in business. Why don't the auto dealers make that another profit center right there? And as I mentioned, they should be selling EV chargers as well. My experience in selling electric vehicles is nothing sells them like butts and seats. So keep doing your live events. That same thing should happen as test drives at dealerships. So they'll have to have some inventory to do that. The auto shows, and I've heard that Houston is now is looking very seriously at having a ride and drive event for electric vehicles in January when the Houston Auto Show comes back. So all of these things are starting to come together where, and you know, just a lot of neighbors are telling their neighbors and friends, hey, come get in my car and try this thing out. And it makes a world of difference. My youngest brother made fun of me for years for driving a plug-in vehicle. One night I went to Houston and I made my car run on gasoline. So I had a full battery pack when I got there. And I just told him, get in the driver's seat. We're going to go take this thing for a spin. And within a month, he came up and bought a Chevy Volt from me. So it's the most important thing you guys do is educating and getting people's butts in those seats. Keep that up, but don't expect that the dealerships are going to be static. There's going to be huge change. And I think it'll be for the better, not if you're a car salesman, but I think that we're going to not depend on those people for as much education. We're going to get it online, just like you do with Tesla and from our neighbors. And we're going to get into the habit of not building cars before they're actually needed and letting them sit in a lot. We're going to order them, patiently wait 4 to 8 weeks for them to come in. And that's the sort of change that's coming in the auto industry right now, at least as far as how I see it. So again, avoid politics, never talk about climate change or the environment unless the person that's interested in the EV brings it up first. And just find out, you know, while you're driving around what the person's into and address their needs. And when you do that, they'll be much more open to getting an electric vehicle.
Wow, that is fantastic, Buzz. Thanks so much. Yeah. That's So folks, you're welcome to put questions in the chat, but actually, Buzz, you just reminded me of one thing, thinking of methods of selling cars. So I lived over in Europe for a while, and there, the way people get a car from a car dealer is they go and they order one and they wait 4 or 6 weeks, and the car they get is not the one that they did the test drive in. So yeah, there's lots of different models, and we'll see what works with the dealers here. Yeah, another story that as you're talking, I remembered was a Jaguar dealership and a Tesla location were located next to each other. And of course, the Jaguar dealership had a whole big lot full of inventory cars. And the Tesla just had, a few parking places around their building. And so one of the Jaguar dealerships saw this truck coming in loaded with another, 8, 10 new Teslas, and then another truck, and the Jaguar dealers were sales folks were talking to each other, and then they went over and asked and said, where are you guys going to put all these cars? And the Tesla guy said, they're all sold. Those cars aren't staying here. They're leaving. They're coming off the trucks, and each one is going. And the jaw just dropped on the Jaguar salesman because they're just used to this model of having a big lot of inventory.
Yeah. And how wasteful, how wasteful is that?
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, it's really eye-opening, all the things that you talked about with dealers and everything. So
there's a war going on behind the scenes right now.
Yeah, I believe it. So let's see what Jim has put in the chat here. Comment, like so many things in life, it's not the capital cost that gets you, but the operating costs. Yep. Yes, that's something I've heard a number of times, is that, oh yeah, those folks at the dealership, they're just talking about the monthly payment. They're not talking about, what's it going to cost for me to keep this vehicle fueled and on the road in drivable condition. And so, yeah, folks in this club, of course, know that difference between what it takes to operate an electric vehicle, both in the way of costs for fuel and in the way of maintenance that's required.
And one really cool tool, I did have a very elaborate spreadsheet where we plugged in, how many miles a year you drive. You could compare any gasoline car to any plug-in hybrid or any battery electric vehicle. And I would ask the customer, what do you pay for electricity per kilowatt hour? How much is gas lately? I haven't bought it in a while. How much do you pay for gas? And if they didn't have that number, there was an Exxon station next door, and I'd lean back and say, okay, gas right now is $3.75 a gallon. So let's put that in, And at the end of all this, it would give you total cost of ownership of both the gasoline car and the electric car in a monthly payment. And believe it or not, I compared a $39,400 Chevy Bolt EV to that Chevy Trax, which was $19,000. And at the end, they were within $5 a month of each other in total cost of ownership. Now, if you could have told the person that up front, both of these cars are going to cost you the same amount of money per month, let's go test drive both of them, they would have never bought the Trax. It would have always been the electric Bolt EV. And I think that's what's being missed out there. But one of the easiest ones to go with is one of the ones that the government has goofed up, and that's MPGE. So you go out there, you look on the window sticker, and there's MPGE. And the way they calculate it is the British thermal units of energy in a gallon of gas versus a kilowatt hour of electricity. Nobody cares about this. Nobody. What they care about is how much money is going to take me to get down the road in this vehicle. And so I created a spreadsheet that only has, I think, 4 cells in it. So it's a spreadsheet that you can have in your smartphone. And you walk over to the window sticker and you put in the number for how many miles you go on 100 kilowatt hours. And then you put in the price of gas, and it calculates the dollar MPGE. And so when gas hit $5 a gallon recently, and I'm paying 10.2 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity at my house, my humble little Chevy Volt wasn't getting the 99 MPGE that the government said. I was getting 135 miles per gallon dollar equivalent. And so this is a tool that you can download. I think I've got it on my blog. If I don't, drop me an email, I can send you one. And I can send it in both Excel or numbers format. If you've got a Apple phone, numbers is what you're going to want. But you can just easily sit down with somebody and say, okay, it had this on the window sticker. This is how much gas costs. This is the dollar equivalent mile per gallon that you're getting. And when people see these numbers, especially the pickup truck drivers, they have been struggling with 19 miles per gallon. And the Ford F-150 Lightning, when gas is over $4 a gallon, I guarantee is probably right around 100 miles per gallon. You tell a pickup truck driver that they can get 100 miles per gallon in the form factor they love, And that's the tipping point for everything.
Mhm. Wow, okay. I hadn't done any numbers with the lightning, but I'm not surprised. Yeah, what I typically did for folks, and this is kind of dated a few years, is most people would buy their gas with their credit card, go to the gas station, put the card in. And so the folks would ask me how much in the way of my electric bill increase is going to come from plugging in a car. And so I just talk about you're moving where you're making the payment, whether you're making a payment to pay your credit card or your electric bill. And I say, well, the $20 increase in your electric bill is going to replace $60 on your credit card, because that's where people pay for things. And it doesn't have anything to do with, most folks don't know what their price per kilowatt hour is or anything like that. I mean, yeah, they got a bill, and those, of course, they put all these things in the bill. There's the base charge and there's this and that. And so that's a 3-to-1 ratio, obviously. And that's typically what I've told people. Now, I haven't recalculated it since gas has gone up and it's drifted down a little bit. So I don't know where we're at today. The cost of electricity, of course, has bounced around some depending on what is happening with freezes in Texas and things like that too.
I'm glad I locked in a rate for 3 years. Right now, I'm under what everybody else is paying. I'm pretty happy about this.
Good. Well, and you brought up time of use, and I'm on a time of use plan, and my car is actually set that it finishes charging by 4 or 5 in the morning. So it will calculate when to start, because otherwise some people will start too early in the evening. They'll start at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or something, and there can still be quite a bit of draw on the grid in those hours. And of course, that's after solar is stopped producing for the day. Yeah. And so I really appreciate the fact that I can tell my car when to be done charging, and it will start sometime at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., whatever it is, and be finished by the time that the time of use rate is about to change from the night rate to the day rate. And so I find that's a reasonable thing too. So, but folks there in the room, anybody want to put their hand up? So Jason.
Actually, I have 2 questions. Oh, thanks. I've actually got 2 questions. First one, back in March when they had the ID Buzz in Austin, I had the fortune to meet the head of e-mobility for Volkswagen in the US.
Yep.
And something that has bothered me for a while is we never get any good choices on colors on cars in the US. It's always red, blue, or some shade of gray. And he told me that this kind of came down to dealers, where the dealers want neutral colors on the lot that they can just sell to the first person that comes in the door that, oh, I guess gray's not my favorite, but I don't hate it, so I'll take it. How much truth is there to that?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of truth in that. There is a saying among car dealership managers that blue cars don't sell. And I love blue cars. I mean, my first Chevy Volt was this electric blue that I just thought was gorgeous. And the fact of the matter is, some of us are color people, and there are some great colors out there. Mazda has a beautiful jewel red that I would love to see on some non-Mazda car. But the problem is, those of us that are really color oriented, it sounds like you are as well, will settle for the white or the silver or the gray if that's all we can get. In the case of the people who don't want flashy colors, they're not that way. They would order a gray one and wait for it.
So my other question was something that comes up a lot in EV discussions is, a lot of us have homes that we can go home and charge at. How do you sell to someone that's in an apartment and doesn't have their own parking spot that they can charge at regularly?
Well, one of the things I tell them is that where most EV people who have the ability to charge at home, it's not like filling up a gasoline car anymore. It's not something we do once a week. It's something we do every night. And so every day when we leave, we have a full tank of gas, so to speak. And we can, if an emergency arises, we've got our maximum range to get the hell out of Dodge. The EV owners that can't charge at home, it really is just like the gas station experience. It takes a little longer, but the latest generation, they're getting it down to about 18 minutes for 80% of the range. But the things I'll tell them is, when's the last time you went into a gas station And they said, oh, no, go ahead and put in a couple of gallons. It's on me. You know, that never happens. But in order to attract businesses, movie theaters, restaurants, malls have put up level 2 charging that's absolutely free to use. And that's a huge deal. You know, everybody would like a little break on the cost of transportation. And with an EV, you get that. Now, if you do need to fill up all the way, then yeah, you go to a DC fast charger, you do that once a week. And it's a little more strain on the battery. I usually don't get into that great detail if they're only doing it once a week. It's, you know, if you were on a long road trip and you're doing several DC fasts a day, that can be rough on the battery. But if you're doing it once a week, it's really not that big a deal. Now, what I haven't seen happen yet, and I've been preaching this to everybody I can think of, is there are huge apartment communities. You know, up here in Valley Ranch, where the Dallas Cowboys practice, you can stand on this hilltop and it's apartments as far as you can see. They were built decades ago. They're not going to put in DC fast chargers at these apartments. They can't, they don't even have the capacity to put in level 2 chargers. Why hasn't someone put in a parking lot, maybe an acre or 2 in size, and not DC fast chargers, fill it up with level 2 chargers, put a security fence around it, a little guard booth, and people come in that live in apartments, drop off their car for one night where they're going to charge it all the way up, level 2, gentle on the battery. It can take all night long, but you're going to have a shuttle van that takes them to their apartment, and they have an appointment where you pick them up the next day, bring them back to their car, and they pay a monthly fee for accessing this parking lot. This seems to me a fraction of the cost of even putting in one DC fast charger. You could service 20, 30, 40 cars a night. And if you located it intelligently right there among huge apartment communities, you're going to have all these customers that aren't going to go anywhere else because you're very convenient to them right there. Maybe you're even within walking distance of their apartment. I think this is something we're going to see in the near future. You see, Shell Oil is involved with, or they're one of the founding members of Evolve Houston, but they're in Europe, they're putting up all these Shell stations that have chargers in them. Nobody wants to go sit at a Shell station for charging, especially if they're limited to say 50 kilowatt charging and it might be 2.5 hours. They would much rather go to some place where they can go into a restaurant, go into a movie theater, something like that. So I think right now, we're just going about it wrong because we don't know what we're doing as a society yet. But those of us that have been driving EVs for a while, we know which way it's going to go. And I think that we just need to share that with as many people that'll listen to us. You know, there are business opportunities. This is 1992 with the internet all over again. There are going to be industries that we can't even imagine today springing up. And whatever the next Amazon is, it'll have something to do with the EV world. And there's just huge opportunities out there. I talk to small towns and small chambers of commerce about how EV charging is an opportunity for them. We took a Chevy Bolt EV on a camping trip. The dealership loaned it to me because I wanted to portray the car as an adventure vehicle, not some kind of Econo box commuting car. So we got a kayak rack. We had a kayak on the roof. We had a bike rack on the back with a couple of mountain bikes. And literally from the backs of the front seats all the way to the back window, it was crammed full of camping equipment. And we went to Enchanted Rock, about 90 miles west of Austin. The nearest DC fast charger is 40 miles away in Kerrville, Texas. Well, the only thing I knew about Kerrville, Texas was when I was in high school band, when we went on a band trip, the Kerrville Bus Company is the bus company we used. So I didn't know anything about Kerrville. One night we decided to go into town to charge the EV, and we knew there was a Mexican restaurant right across the street. Turned out it was pretty good. So we had dinner and drinks while the car charged. And then we drove around the town. We saw they had a beautiful park downtown that had a river running through it. We had a kayak with us, had bike trails running along the side of the river. We had bikes with us. So we made a point of going back to Kerrville again. Well, COVID and Amazon have taught us that we can work from pretty much anywhere. A lot of us have portable jobs, and that Amazon can get whatever we need to buy delivered to us, even if there isn't a big shopping mall 2 miles away from us. So the migration we've seen for the last couple of 100 years in the United States, where it's been rural people moving to the cities to get to the economic powerhouse, people are tired of being cramped together in the cities and now are starting to consider moving back out to the countryside because They have a portable career and they can get the goods they need. And they think life is going to be at a slower pace. It'll be better for their health to get away from the pollution and all. It's actually a great thing. But if you're a chamber of commerce trying to attack businesses, or you're the mayor of a town trying to attract builders and people to come live in the houses that the builders build, how are they even going to find out about your town? Well, the way is they have to stop if they've got an electric vehicle in charge there. So there's a huge opportunity for electric charging infrastructure to change the fate of a way for a small town that hasn't been done in a while. In the 1800s, if the railroads came through your town prospered. In the 1900s, if the interstate highway system came through your town prospered. In the 21st century, it will be EV charging that is the pathway for prosperity, in my opinion.
One other thing I wanted to mention on that topic was my sister's in Seattle, and she just got a notice from her electric utility that if she and a couple of the people on her street get together and put in a request, they'll install chargers on the utility poles. You mentioned that you talk to electric companies occasionally, so I thought that might be something you could propose to them, and it might help solve that problem a little bit too.
And that's very popular in Europe. It's right there on the light pole. A lot of times it's a 110 outlet, but you know what? A 110 volt 12 amp outlet can replace 40 miles of driving with a charge overnight. So the vast majority of Americans drive less than 40 miles a day. It just seems such an obvious choice. And 12 amps is nothing, you know. We all get worried about the grid, but not everybody needs to charge at 350 amps or 350 kilowatts.
Yeah, and thinking of light poles, I've even heard that as the rewired and put LED lights in a lot of these street lights and stuff, they now have larger capacity wires than what they need because those were put in before LED lights were invented. And so now there's capacity of wiring going to those light poles. Yeah.
And I'm hoping we see more distributed energy generation. I don't know why electric companies aren't putting solar panels on people's homes and considering that an extra generation for them. You know, the family doesn't have to buy the solar panels. They're just basically leasing you some roof space to put your panels on so that you can keep your electric company making profits and keeping the grid stable. It seems like a win-win, but it's something that electric companies get very nervous about because I think just like car dealerships, there's going to come a time that the utility companies, at least for electricity, aren't going to exist anymore. You will be able to generate electricity right at home. So, you know, it's just evolution.
Yeah. A number of folks in the club know, I don't think that I've mentioned to you, Buzz, but when I named my first Tesla, I gave it the name EV plus PV. Yeah, a lot of folks in the club know it's kind of a question. Do you get the PV first and then the EV, or do you get the EV first and then the PV? Yeah, so
for me, it was EV PV.
Okay, very good, very good. So, all right, thanks, Jason. Any more from the folks in the room there? And I saw Professor Davis log in. I don't know whether he's there physically as well or if he's only online. Professor Davis, by all means, if you have any questions or comments, we welcome those. So, okay, someone else coming into the waiting room here.
Yeah, my name is Curtis. And,
yes.
And I'm an architecture professor at University of Houston. I'm eating some pizza now because it just turned out that some of my colleagues from industrial design were here taking a tour just by happenstance. And I'm teaching a studio as part of a segment at the intermediate level on the impact of technology and environment on society. And we're specifically focused on recycling, which is the overall studio, and I decided to focus on EV conversions. And when I saw this meeting, and it was dealing with car dealers, and my brother just bought a BMW in California, so he's got money. And so my thought was that with the Ford F-150 coming out, the Lightning, it's going to really affect the market. And like this summer, my landscape guy came to me, I came to him and said, do you want me to pay you more money because of the added cost in gas? And he said, no, but if you could help me get one of them F-150 Lightnings, then I could charge all my equipment. I wouldn't have to use gas-fired stuff. And that just reminded me that there are a lot of F-150s in the market right now. And anybody who's driving a 2020 F-150 and has got the money to buy a Lightning, what's going to happen with that F-150 when they sell it? And all the projections about the impact of EVs is predicated on new EVs penetrating the market. Well, if you start doing conversions of existing EVs, the idea of penetration and more people seeing in EVs would go radical. And I heard you guys talking about different ways of marketing your service. Well, if every salesperson of an EV had a cousin or a brother-in-law or a good friend doing conversions, you begin to help build your own market. And the person who buys has a 2020 F-150 that gets converted is going to now be thoroughly wanting the new F-150 Lightning, and will get it sooner and later, and there will be a secondary market. So my point is, how do you facilitate that? Anybody with a 2020 F-150 that has a blown engine should not replace that engine with anything but an EV conversion kit. The kits exist. How do you tie that into the market? So at one level, it's kind of a community garage repair situation. Another level, you've got folks like yourself in the dealer market. How do you leverage across the community so that you serve a broader range of community doing that? So our studio is looking at it from a design point of view. So I've got one of my students that got lost. I knew where the old TXRX labs was. I got lost getting here, but I got here. And I'm more interested in the culture. That is, there are communities of people who sell cars, who make cars, who build cars. And I love the fact that you were depoliticizing this and saying, you know, it's not about the politics, it's just about good sense. And to the extent that we can impact it from a cultural dimension, it would be great. I mean, I'm looking at all of the low riders and slab clubs to talk to those guys about doing EV conversions on their lifts. So when they get the car up on three wheels and tilting, and then the low riders and all of those guys put $60,000 to $80,000 into those cars. They could drop a conversion kit in it like nothing and do a whole new thing. So again, it becomes a cultural issue. We have a romanticizing. We love cars in this culture. And so why not embrace it and celebrate it, recreate it, do some new things with it. And it need not just be left up to government and corporate America to deliver an EV conversion, but that could happen from the bottom up as well. And that can be worked out. That can be facilitated from people in the middle. So a salesperson for an EV is right in the middle. Anybody who's selling a car or buying a car is selling a car. And being able to create that network and be, you know, everybody I know who's in the car salesman business has a network. And the best car salesmen got great networks. And whether it's to a bank where, you know, the banker kind of shovels their lending business to you, those are the guys that make the most money, or something else. The question is, how do we bring that creativity to it? So my issue is to get my students focused on that as designers, and to look at the whole garage space and idea as a social cultural space and a networking space to facilitate that. So I kind of went on about it, but that's why I came. That's why I brought my students to kind of connect with this group from the point of view of saying that it's more than just getting butts and seats of cars coming out of factories, that it's about getting into the heads and the imaginations of people to not just look at a new vehicle, but look at an existing vehicle and converting it. And we ought to be able to convert one EV truck for every 5 that are purchased. And if that happens, I don't know anybody who's done those numbers, but I got to believe it's good money. if I'm in the auto supply business, that's going to be good. If I'm a garage, if I do auto repair, and part of my big money in my business is pulling engines, no big deal for me to convert to doing that for EV. So my job is maintained and sustained. Same thing with bikes and every other vehicle that has an internal combustion engine. Those things break, and we can't be throwing them away. So if you can have a conversion kit on those, I think it would be a fantastic supplement to the new market.
Well, thanks a lot, Professor Davis. And yeah, we've had a number of members who've been interested in conversions over time. I don't know if John Atwood happens to be there this evening. Maybe not.
May I speak? Bill Swann?
Yeah, Bill.
This is a great idea. There are at least two people in the room that have done conversions. Me, Bill, and Shelton. We can't predict the future. I will say that, are you in sort of in a design mode that is? Yes. Sure. Sure. You know, there's a difference between going out and seeing what's on the market to retrofit, convert an F-150. I suspect that the most expensive part is the battery. And of course, that depends upon the size of the battery, the kilowatt hours. The reason I make a distinction between initial design and going out to the market and buying components and is that this is an opportunity to really do a good design. The components may not be there on the market. And I'm thinking particularly of the battery. I have a Selectria E10 pickup truck, and it was designed, it was engineered. It wasn't hacked, you know. I mean, I've helped a couple of hacks, and usually they're not pretty. And so this is an opportunity. And the reason I mentioned the Selectria pickup truck, Selectria, they're defunct now, built a battery box between the frame to carry a rather large lead acid battery in the day. And so, again, I just want to emphasize this is a great opportunity, especially if you're approaching it from the initial design, let's get it right and good. You know, you're competing with the cars that can go, what does an F-150 Lightning go? 100, probably 200, 300 miles.
250.
You're going to have to design a rather significant battery pack. And that's probably the biggest part of the engineering problem. Shall I say? Yeah.
So I think you're right. The cost of the battery is prohibitive. The total cost of a conversion, the gentleman from Austin is probably familiar with an outfit up there called Momentum. Maybe not. They do conversions. If you want to take a classic car there and have them perform a really top-notch professional conversion, they'll tell you to budget $90K. This is not a hobbyist's endeavor. This is something for somebody who's got a real passion or a vocation for it. But that's just the way things are today. Yeah, I'm 55 and I've been wrong about a couple of things, and a couple of things that were really notable were LED lighting. When I was a kid, LEDs cost about $5 a piece. They put out just a little bit of light, and I couldn't conceive that anybody would ever want to use those deliberately for lighting. But demand comes, and demand drives innovation, and innovation drives down cost. And now LED lighting is much cheaper than what it replaced. And I made the same mistake regarding, I guess, two related technologies. People might remember a little flash in the pan, CD-ROMs and DVD-ROMs, DVD writers. Nobody uses those things anymore because they were so expensive when they were new, $500 or $1,000 for a DVD writer for your computer. And now they're so cheap, nobody bothers with them because you can get a flash drive, which doesn't have any moving parts at all. But again, same thing. When they were new, they were tremendously expensive. About 10 years ago, I paid $1,500 for a 64 gigabyte drive. And now you wouldn't consider that because, you know, you can buy that at the grocery store for considerably less than that. Demand will drive innovation, which will drive down the cost. And I think that if you can build that kind of a culture where people are interested in taking, and I think your ratio is maybe a good one out of 5 of these retired vehicles get converted into something that may be enough to start driving down the cost of conversion, because right now it's not feasible. But yeah, I've been wrong on this a couple of times before. So I think maybe, you know, I should expect that the cost could come down. So that's my thoughts.
Great. I appreciate those thoughts. And also, I'd really like to encourage you, bring your conversion on the 24th over to Condit Elementary in Bel Air. It would be great for everybody to see what it is that you converted as well. So anybody else?
Timing is everything.
Yeah, well, that's true too. I'm just encouraging everybody. I mean, everybody's got their own schedules, but anybody else in the room who's got or knows somebody with a conversion, please emphasize bringing those. But on top of it, of course, anyone who's got something that's, you might say, new or unique, we'd love to have you also bring your car, even if it's been manufactured as an EV. Oh no. But bringing out all these different cars. Remember the previous time, the Ford Mach-E Mustang was new, and 2 people that weren't even folks that had come to our meetings in the club brought their cars out there, and both of them had their hoods up and had iced drinks in their frunk. Yeah, I mean, that's they were happy to have their cars and to show them and share them with everybody. And yeah, and anybody who can just go to that website, you can sign up. If you don't care to sign up, you can just show up. And so we love to have folks coming out. So more comments, questions from folks in the room or online. So a few more folks joined online. I see Randy and your family. Seth, you're on. A few other folks, Glenn, Jim, John, Diane, Jennifer.
A question for Buzz. What panel are you going to be on in San Diego?
Let's see. San Diego, they got me into an environmental group, but they were also interested in the dynamics of the dealership world. So it'll be a combination of those 2 things. So kind of myth busting about the disinformation that's out there and what's going on in the automotive industry on the dealership level.
Take some pictures for us.
Okay. And then about 2 or 3 weeks after that in Austin is the Move America show. It's going to be in 5 different cities this year. I was disappointed in the first one I attended in Austin because COVID had hit and a bunch of the booths were empty. People didn't even show up. So it wasn't really the show's fault. They have a ton of speakers and tons of subjects that they're covering. So that's, if you can make it to Austin, that's a good show to check out.
When is that one?
That one, let's see. I'm one of the speakers there as well, so I know I've got this one on here. Move America is the 27th and 28th of this month. That's a Tuesday, Wednesday in Austin.
Okay, so it falls during National Drive Electric Week as well, but maybe by coincidence. But great, yeah, that's not too far away for folks here in Austin. And Andrew, I see that you're there. What's going on in your world?
Right now I'm in Arizona on our way to San Diego in my new car. I know this hadn't been announced to the group yet. I ended up getting a EV6 in Houston last month.
Congrats. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. That is fantastic. Yeah. I see people in the room are happy there too. That is great to hear. So instead of flying, you've driven the new car out there. All right.
Yes, sir. Ended up bringing Dad along as well as little sister Abigail. And we started, let's see here, yesterday early morning from Houston to Phoenix, and now from Phoenix to San Diego.
All right. Very good.
Which trim level?
There he is. I love it. Yeah.
Which version of the EV6 did you get?
I ended up getting the rear wheel drive Yacht Blue Wind.
Wind. That was probably exactly the car I was going to buy.
Yep.
I've been unable to get them up here in Dallas Fort Worth without it being 10,000 over MSRP. Excellent car choice.
Thank you.
Very good.
What kind of range are you getting on the trip?
So on the trip, I've been mostly getting guessometer range of about 220 at 100%. But that's because we've been doing 80 down the freeway pretty much the whole time. And each of the legs have been about 100 to 130 mile stretches. And each charge session has only been about 12 minutes max.
It charges so fast.
Yes.
Yeah, that is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Great, you're having a good experience with it. Yeah.
How is the charging experience? Are you finding plenty of places to charge?
So that's very interesting. Between Houston and Phoenix, everything was great. There were a couple of stations here and there that were down. Something I was concerned about too was they had just announced a couple of days ago that they were starting upgrades on all of their stations network wide. So starting the 7th, which was yesterday, they were doing software upgrades on all of them. So I was worried that they'd be limited power, but so far they've all given full power. Today, we're taking a slight detour north that adds about 30 minutes to our time, because there was one charger in South Arizona that had very poor reliability ratings on PlugShare. So I just wanted to avoid that risk of being stranded there. Here at this one, we just waited on a Rivian to unplug and leave because 3 out of the 4 stations were down, actually.
Oh, we saw lightning, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We saw lightning yesterday for the first time in person.
Wow.
Yeah, which was kind of, and did you tell them that they're comping all the chargers? So we're traveling all the way to California on their nickel. They didn't charge anything. They're not charging anybody for these past 2 days.
All right.
I know.
And that's really something that's good. You're using PlugShare to look at reliability ratings. Good. Good. Yeah, because that is always an issue that we get asked about, and other folks that have made long distance trips. Yeah, you go to a station, as you say, 3 out of the 4 are down. That really crimps the ability of drivers to use that location.
Yeah, like this one right here. There are
3 out of 4.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. So it's really, really tough. Makes it difficult. But at least you have something. So I'm grateful for that.
Right. It may be a little bit of a time hit, but you do get the charge that you need. And as you say, the charging is going fast. So that's really good.
Yeah, but really it hasn't been an issue because it hasn't been congested at the charging station. So that's a good thing.
Up until this point, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, we haven't had to really wait.
We did see we met a couple that were driving in their what was it? Mach-E? Yeah, in their Mach-E, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia to San Diego.
Yeah. and we had a couple of Germans just previously, and they were driving
an ID4 test vehicle.
Yeah, and doing testing on it. So that was kind of interesting.
Okay, very good. So in the room there, someone want to use the mic?
I've got a question on the charging issue. As I understand it, and there are people in the room who can answer this question, Tesla has a strategic advantage because their cars are tied to their charging network electronically. So their network knows the status of their cars, and the cars know the status of the charging network. And so that communication allows for better performance. Now they're opening up their network and the new net, more or less. Question: is there a market for a third-party accessory that you could plug into your EV in the way that you can plug in information now to get status on your engine and the like, that could tie to your cell phone, give your battery status to a network, because the status of your car should be valuable to the networks, right? That is, they want to make money on consistently using the network. And between access more universally to communicate status of cars and networks, the charging anxiety would go down radically, and the efficiency of the power grid would be radically improved, so that things like off-peak charging and all of that would be improved if every car anonymously, because I think you can do that technologically, if every car's battery status and its location relative to charging stations was known, and the status of the charging stations was known to the cars. It seems like the technology can be done. That's not a big deal. The question is, how do you advocate that and advance that?
Good question. Buzz, you have any thoughts on that?
No, not really. It would really depend that the telematics be tied to that charge port in the way that the Tesla is. I don't know that that kind of data hookup is already there. It might be possible to add that through the, what do they call it, the ODBC port, but I just don't have enough technical knowledge to address that.
I do know that there's a company called Tritium, and they build DC fast chargers, and they actually communicate through the charging cable. Now, what communications, I don't know exactly, but Jason, do you have some comments?
Yeah, actually, so they already do that through the charge cable. The car knows what it needs from the charger, they talk about it. And so they already get that while you're plugged in. The networks don't really care when you're not plugged into the charger though. They mainly care about, when there's people at the charger, what kind of queue they're looking at and how quickly they can get people back off the charger so the space opens up for someone else. Mostly what's useful to the networks is actually heat maps of where people are driving and where the holes in their network are in relation to the heat map. And that can be done just from looking at standard traffic patterns in the US, because where people drive their cars now is where they're going to drive their EVs when they have EVs. What's most useful actually for connecting data from the car using the OBD port is, or from other sources, is when you're actually driving as a user and you're using your own data and having the map, on the car's dash know your current state of charge and all that, so it knows when to find a charging station for you. You can take the guesswork out of it, and that's what gets rid of the range anxiety, is when the car is already taking care of the charging plan for you, you can just get in and drive. And that's something that we do on the route planner, the better route planner. If you can hook up a OBD dongle and talks to a phone on Bluetooth and gets that data on your map, and then your map takes care of the charge planning for you.
Yeah, Randy and Andrew, do you have any comments on your routing and so forth?
I was about to say, with the OBD2 dongle hooked up to the Better Route Planner, it helps with accuracy a whole lot.
Very much.
Good.
Because who knows, with like car to car, your tire pressure could be different. You don't know what kind of consumption you're getting because of the weather. And when it's hooked up like that, like Jason was saying, it adapts to what your current consumption you're getting.
Okay.
But yeah, 2 cents.
Hey, Andrew, this is Emma.
Hey, Emma, what's up?
Congrats. Yeah, I had a question. You mentioned something about, well, I guess with the Electrify America stations being upgraded with software, things were free, but you got free or fast charging on Electrify America for 2 years as well with your Kia, right?
Not with 2 years. So Kia and Hyundai, I think they did it a little different. They only gave me 1,000 kilowatt hours of free charging.
I see.
Which I mean, that's still, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
But yes. So, and then with that also, I was thinking, all right, so I was planning out, we're gonna have to pay for stations and all that. Between, I think it's the whole of Texas is priced per minute of charging.
Right.
And a whole lot more expensive when it's priced per kilowatt hour. So I was going to use my Electrify America Plus Pass membership in Texas. Yes, in Texas. And then only use the Kia free charging when I was in price per kilowatt hour states.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Good idea.
But yeah.
Good that you figured that out. And, yeah, good to know what rules these manufacturers are putting out there. So. So I see that Buzz has had to depart from our meeting here tonight. He wrote in the chat, I'm going to have to go. I'm still not packed for my flight tomorrow. Thanks for inviting me. So of course, I'll thank him again later. And so it was really good to get his point of view on things, considering his life experiences there. And, so that's really great. So Bill, you had mentioned that Sagar is there tonight. I thought I saw you there in the back. Yeah. And that he has provided you some equipment for controlling your battery charging and such, and that would be great to hear about. Is that possible? All right.
Thanks. As folks know here, we are located here in TXRX, and we are a charging operator ourselves, developer, infrastructure developer. At this point, we operate more than 100 charging stations across Texas, and we're growing pretty fast. So working with Bill, we're toying with the idea of connecting solar panels to charging stations. So we have as of today hooked up a charging station to his solar panels, and I think Bill successfully charged his car today.
Yay!
I sent you a photograph or two via text. I'm sorry.
Okay. Did they happen to go to Colin as well as to me?
So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. The earlier photos, right. I don't know if Colin, if you're able to send them from your phone to your email and call them up on your laptop. Otherwise, somebody in the room could hand their phone around to folks in the room. Folks online might not see those photos, but folks in the room could see them. Whatever works. But yeah, Bill, that's fantastic that you're charging your car. I love it.
Yeah, we're going to take some data over the next month, and at the next meeting, we'll present
all right,
downside and upside.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, any questions you guys have in terms of infrastructure? Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize that you had a location there in the labs. That's great. I mean, I knew, of course, you're around Houston. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you every second Thursday. That'd be really good. And of course, you can also talk with all the folks that show up on Saturday, the 24th over at Condit Elementary. And yeah, hopefully, sorry I'm not there in person today, but hopefully we'll get a chance to talk some more about how your business is doing. And I see that Diane has asked a question in the chat. I have a question regarding the charging stations that were mentioned earlier. And please excuse me, I don't really know much about EVs. Does the city/state pay for the charging stations, or is that provided by the company that develops the EVs? And just real quick, I'll mention here that Randy and Andrew and Abigail said that we may lose you because they're going to be driving some more. Okay, so Diane, your question about charging, and I'll let Sagar add some more things as well. But so typically with every EV, you get what I usually call a cord set. So something that you can plug into an outlet at your home or apartment, if you have some outdoor outlets, and then you can charge your car typically overnight, because the rate that you can get out of regular outlet requires some number of hours. today we've also been talking about DC fast charging, sometimes called supercharging. And so there are such things. I know over at Baybrook Mall, for example, there are free chargers. Most of them, all but one, are level 2, and there is one DC fast charger. And those are paid for by the companies that are around the mall because they want people to drive out there and shop. So I don't know of any city or state paid for, although there might be maybe something like a public library or something like that where you can charge without any cost. And as far as the companies that develop the EVs, in the case of Tesla, they have their own network. In the case of all the other manufacturers, they are using networks that are done by separate companies. Sometimes there can be a car charging company relationship, such as between VW and Electrify America, but those are open to any brand of car to use when people are driving cross country. So basically, people will charge their EVs where they live if they can, and then when they're traveling, they use the chargers that are along the freeways across the country. So Sagar, would you like to add on some more info on your infrastructure company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you covered most of the key points. Usually, as a EV charging network operator or infrastructure developer, we are putting out infrastructure at different facilities, be there hotels, malls, retail shopping complexes, and we are there running the network. We're making these chargers available to the public, and usually cities or states are generally not involved because we're installing these on private property. There are some opportunities. There are some cities that are through their public procurement processes, trying to procure chargers to be installed on city facilities. In which case, the way in which the charging fees will be collected will be dependent on how the city determines in those instances. So that's city by city, especially if city funds are involved. So as a private entity or as a private developer, we are neutral to where we put our infrastructure. If a hotel calls us, it is a separate setup, and if we win a bid for installing chargers on a city property, then we have to be in terms with the way the city RFP or procurement process is set up. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and you reminded me the city of Houston has a fleet of EVs, so they have charging for their own city EVs. And that's good that you mentioned hotels, because I think often someone can stay at a hotel that has charging and they can recharge their car where they stay overnight at the hotel. And so they're getting free fuel for their car with a stay at that hotel. So yeah, it's always great to see more hotels adding charging. So I'm glad that you're in the business you're in.
So Dave.
Yes, Seth.
So I recently over the summer took a split round trip to Virginia with my Bolt. I brought my daughter up to Virginia to do a summer internship and left her with the Bolt.
Good.
So going up, yes, I did through PlugShare identify hotels along my route that had charging infrastructure. Mm-hmm. I found a number of hotels that just had electric outlets that I could plug my charger into. Mm-hmm. So basically every night I either plugged in at a hotel provided level 2 charger, plugged in with the charger I had with me, or in one city in South Carolina, there was a public facility that had a level 2 charger, half a mile walk from my hotel. So it's quite possible, and I find PlugShare to be a really good resource for finding chargers.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So that's an app that a lot of people put on their phones, and it really helps. Yeah, because if you're traveling, that's when you need chargers that you're not having gone to normally. As I mentioned, Baybrook Mall, somebody might go there. Once you get to know where those chargers are at, you might look, see if it's open, and park your car there. And while you're shopping for an hour, get some free juice. But
I actually
people
found a
traveling.
couple of car dealerships that had a level 3 chargers that were available after hours.
Oh, that's even better. Yeah. All
So,
right.
so you, I actually charged it. I charged it the same one on the way up in June as I did on the way back in August in Virginia. Was it Virginia? I was still in Virginia at that point.
Okay. Yeah.
But
'Cause
PlugShare is a wonderful tool for finding places to charge.
It is, and sometimes you got to also learn some tricks while traveling. I was traveling near the East Coast, and I found that one of the indicated chargers was inside the parking area for an airport after I got to it. And then I read the sign, and it says you're allowed 15 minutes to go in and back out without being charged for parking at the airport. And so I went in and I charged for 14 minutes and I left. So, yeah, there were kinds of things like that. And I should also maybe mention for Diane, so we are recording this, and our Houston Electric Vehicle Association meetings recordings are put on a YouTube channel that, thanks to Colin, we have. And so give him a couple of days after this meeting, and lo and behold, he'll work his magic. And if you want to review any of the stuff that we're mentioning here today, you're welcome to call it up on YouTube, and you can hear parts of this meeting or something like that if you want to hear some of the details again. So, and that of course applies to everybody and for everything about this meeting and last week's meeting and back and back and back to whenever it was we started. I guess it kind of ties into when the pandemic started. It's when we started doing these with recordings. So, well, thanks, Seth. That's really good. So, yeah.
He had a charging infrastructure question. So.
Yeah.
So my question was about solar charging. I saw a picture of Bill's charger connected to his solar system. And there's a feature that I haven't seen on chargers in the United States that I saw on a European charger, where they basically put a CT on the output of the solar system, and it tells the charger when there's renewable energy available. You could also put it on the output of your house, like if it's a residential system, and it controls the charger. Then does its control based on what this CT is telling it. And the reason it's important to me is because they just recently changed the rate structure in Texas for electricity, and so it's no longer essentially a net metering system. It's a system where you're paying a delivery fee for anything that comes in. So I don't want to pay any more than I have to, for charging my car. So with this system, you could plug your car in, and assuming you're not in a hurry and it's not nighttime, if there's solar, the charger would basically shut itself off if the air conditioner came on, and all of a sudden now you're pulling power, because now you're also, any power for your car is going to be coming off the grid. The UK charger was pretty cool. It had a button on it. So if you were in a hurry, you really needed your car charged, you just hit this button and it overrides the whole system. But otherwise you could leave your car plugged in, say over the weekend. And when the air conditioner turns off, for its cycle, you get a little bit of charge on your car. And then when the air conditioner comes back on, it probably kicks you out. But you'd also have to be able to ramp the power, and I know there's stages for the charging. I was just kind of curious if you thought about a circuit like that, and if you knew if there were more stages than just the ones that, because I think it probably depends on the charger in each car.
So I think with solar charging, there's a third component there in the mix, is the storage battery, right? So the power electronics is usually on the car. The car is always the load device, and it's always in control of the whole charging setup. In terms of having a CV on the PV side of things, and using that information to be made available. I think that's doable. I think it's something that we could possibly consider here in the experiment. But on a large commercial scale, if you think of charging infrastructure for the society and for the states at large, solar has to always be paired with the battery storage pack. And right now, the storage packs are very expensive. So if we, and generally, I mean, I'll give a relative comparison. When we go to a hotel and we're installing, let's say, 8 chargers there, so I'm looking at about 300 kW system, 200 to 300 kW system, and we are directly connected to the grid at that point, which is reliable, stable, and all that. Now, if we have to either add a solar system with a battery pack to support or to supply a 300 kW system, the capex involved is pretty expensive at that point. So the cost of bringing in solar panels and lithium ion storage pack for 300 kilowatt is pretty significant. I think what 5 kilowatt battery or maybe 20 kilowatt battery costs about 10 grand. Right. So think of 300 kilowatts. It's a huge cost just for the battery packs. So now think of that. That is just for one hotel, right? Now think of 1,000 hotels in Texas trying to do solar with lithium ion battery. It's just economically at this day and time becomes infeasible. In future, will things change? I hope so. I definitely hope so. It's always driven by the lithium battery pack. It's just as in the vehicle as well as for storage, right? If that drops, then most of these added features, added technologies, what we can do with those cities, the focus will be there. I think in the industry where we see a lot of current focus happening, technology and innovation wise, is on the charger itself. The chargers are getting more ruggedized. There are standards coming up for the chargers. The communication between the charger and the vehicle is going through at a different level. PLCs to high level communications, they're all happening, and all the standards are coming, and all the OEMs have to adopt those standards, and vehicles need to come back on the road with those high level communication capabilities, but also the infrastructure needs to sort of be ready for that. So most of the research, most of the innovation is happening between the communication between the charger and the vehicle, so to speak. But what can be done with the CTs and the solar system and all that, I think that is going to be considered more on a case by case basis, or applications where solar will be more viable compared to, like, I mean, if it's a rural, there's not grid available, it's the middle of out there, and solar is a viable option at that point, then yes, obviously all these things will come into play. And but if it is in the middle of Houston, solar is not that, I mean, you have grid power readily available, so you would tend to focus on more grid ready solutions. So yeah.
Business model
Uh-huh.
of the charger. Technical side is going to evolve.
Yeah.
And I think this question is perfect. What drives you is the lowest cost of energy to access. From a business model point of view, is it fair to say you're like a vending machine?
Yep.
So guys that go around and sell vending machines, and that's the model that you.
Yeah. In a way, yeah. We are a kiosk based business. Yeah.
So the question to that is, if there were other, government or condo association or neighborhood association purchase of additional power somewhere, either added power, solar, that matter, something that, who would finance that? Other than a condo association.
If you'd like to pass the mic over, then we could catch what would also be commented.
Who would finance the supplemental power? That is the business model for the chargers is pretty simple. They're like vending machines. And the question is, they're going to go to the lowest cost energy provider to get to you. And that's off the grid. Anything that's not on the grid is going to cost something, capital. And the question is, how do you finance that and how do you incentivize that? And is it in your business interest or in whose interest to advocate for that? Because it seems to me that capital is always looking for opportunities for investment. This is obviously a growing concern. If I had money to put in my housing association, if I could talk to my board and say, let's invest in this, and we get a percentage because we're providing that additional power to the vending machine operator. They keep things working, they keep the network working, they keep everything operating, and we provide that benefit at lower cost to our ultimate members and customers, if I'm a condo association or if I'm an apartment owner. Again, my interest is very much on the social mechanism, finance, design side, not so much the technology, because the technology is going to move faster than society. So the question becomes, how do you get society to stay up with the technology, to take advantage of this?
I think in our opinion, it's very decentralized. So it's got to be coming up from grassroots and from the association levels, right? Because as a charging provider, we are agnostic to where we are. You know, if it is highway, we'll be at the highway. If it is a apartment association, we'll be at the apartment association. Our intention is to provide charging whenever, wherever, 24 hours. That's our vision and that's our drive. Now, how can we be facilitated? Obviously, if there's a housing board association that wants to bring us in and work out different business structures, and we're always open to entertain and support and see what options that there are. I mean, if there is a if there's a client that owns 100 Hilton hotels, they will have a different way of thinking this through. Whereas if it is and we see some of these conversations come up when we talk to the city about having access to charging infrastructures on an equity level basis, like how do we bring charging to the second ward in the city, right? Maybe because how do you do that? Somebody has to put the dollars down for the capital investment. It's always the capex, because opex, I think for most part, it's somehow figured out. It's always the capex that is the sort of blocker, right? But there are, I mean, we give financing options, but ultimately the buyer or the developer or the landowner, right? The housing board association, who makes those decisions, they all have to get together, and so that's why I open my answer with decentralized. We are a stakeholder in this decision making. But the initiative, and we can drive some of the decisions, we can influence them, we can help participate, make them the decision, but it is a little bit decentralized. It has to be decentralized. There's never going to be a consensus between housing association in, let's say, Houston versus housing association in Dallas. This is never going to happen. But it can all, they're all different. They will all be different, and we just are flexible to accommodate whatever deal structure or whatever scenario we can provide our charging infrastructure. Yes, sir.
So I think what you hit on is an important part, that what the community or the condo association or the apartment has to offer is the land, right? And the two services that you've described that are the power production via solar PV arrays and the power delivery to an EV via the type of mechanism that the gentleman is describing are two different businesses. And there is already a business, there are a number of them, that will lease space from you on your garage rooftop, and they'll put up the CapEx, they'll install and maintain the solar array, and you negotiate with them either a royalty or a lease payment or some combination of it, very much the same as you would if you had a farm and you wanted to put up a windmill. You own the farm, somebody else wants to use your space to do something. And there are arrangements that you can enter for that to provide power, and you've got a revenue stream. And then separate from that, if that's the mechanism that you have for getting enough power into this block where you want to be able to deliver 50 or 100 or 300 kilowatts of power, then you have a separate business opportunity to enter into with an organization like this one for the charging. But the two are not mutually exclusive. There's an opportunity for synergy, but you could still enter into one or both depending on what you have. If you've got a garage rooftop, but not a lot of EV owners, well, maybe you start with that.
Yeah, we as a developer, we're talking to businesses, real estate owners, all the way down to Laredo to the Texas border. On the left side, on the southwest side, all the way down to McAllen. From here to McAllen on the 77, down to South Padre. We're talking to real estate people. We're talking to everybody saying, can we lease out a real estate spot from you? We want to come in and put our chargers. DC chargers, if they're on the interstate, possibly L2s if they are in exit-based businesses, hotels and things like that. So, there's a push and pull. So we are actively reaching out to see how we can expand and propagate our infrastructure on the interstates. At which case, we can't possibly be buying land all over states, right? But we figured out that the way to do that is to partner with real estate people and see if we could lease out stuff like that. But then we also have organic calls coming in, say, hey, we got a budget and we want to have 10 chargers at our hotel. Can you guys come and help with that? And we do that too.
All right, that's great discussion. I appreciate it. So any other questions from folks?
Sure, Bill Swann here. So let me clarify. So I have this container with 5,000 watts of solar and 20 kWh of lithium batteries. We're sort of at this confluence now of EVs coming on strong nationwide. With the Inflation Reduction Act that was just passed, there's a large emphasis on replacing fossil fuels with electricity, which in many cases are non-fossil, certainly not fossilized. That's a good word, like the transportation industry is. But the missing link, the confluence of EVs and the push towards solar, the missing link is funding for batteries. And as Sagar has mentioned, they're quite expensive now. And I would not be surprised if we, in a year from now, we have this conversation. Maybe there will be, due to the development of batteries through Tesla and all those companies, that there'll be a push to subsidize, or maybe the price will just drop because of large production of batteries. So solar charging off the grid is a work in progress.
Just to give a price point reference, right now I think it's about $500 per kilowatt hour for storage, give or take. And that's mainly because of the current day technology. Most of the lithium ion batteries use cobalt, so the chemistry is different. But there's active research being done by all the battery manufacturers, OEMs, and academia to change the chemistry from from cobalt dependent to non-cobalt dependent. So they're going to ferrous phosphates and things like that. So hopefully, I think the push will come when that curve goes down from 500 down to, I don't know what the break even is to large scale exploding thing, but somewhere down the line when it drops down.
So what Bill said actually gave me a thought. So this last May, I got a chance to go out to Sweden and see the guys that are working on the route planner, which was really cool. But kind of the way all these things fit together, I think EVs are the missing link that you're talking about with batteries. And to explain what I mean by that, we've talked about vehicle to grid a lot here, where your EV serves as a backup battery for the grid. But I think the bigger picture on that is that, like, there's a better way that we could use our cars that would help that. So in Sweden, most families have just one car, and their infrastructure is set up so that they can do most of what they need to using other forms of also electrified transportation, electric buses, electric bikes, trams that run off of, hardline electric grids. And so they really only take EVs for special trips. So most of their EVs are, plugged in at home, and there would be perfect backup batteries. They're plugged into the solar at home, so they're charging. And then at night, they're sleeping so they can discharge into the grid and charge the next day. And so, and it was, when I was there in Sweden, it was so convenient to get around because you could just jump on a bus that's coming by every 5 minutes, or jump on a tram that's, coming by every 15 minutes, and it's going 100 miles an hour down the track, way faster than I could be driving. And it was a really eye-opening experience compared to the infrastructure we have now, where, I have to get in a car and wait in traffic and all this other stuff, where there's no traffic on the tram line. It's real easy. So I think EVs can be that missing link. We have to change the way we think about the new infrastructure we're building and focus it on like people first rather than cars first, and making it so that we don't necessarily have to take a car. We can if we want to, but making it our neighborhoods and our cities more free to move around without a car will help a lot with having these giant batteries that we can use for more than one purpose.
That is great. So glad that you made it over there to work with everybody in Sweden. Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah, and as you say, in a lot of other countries around the world, they view transportation differently. We've all seen here in Houston, they just keep widening the freeways.
Yeah, just one more lane, that'll fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get the induced demand. That's right. Yep. Oh, so this has been great. Anybody else have some final comments? I'll just remind everybody, Saturday the 24th, go ahead and look online for the Houston event of the National Drive Electric Week. driveelectricweek.org is the website. And as I said, the recording from today will be available, so that if you want to relive any of these moments tonight, you're welcome to do that after it gets posted. And thanks for everybody, all you folks that have been putting in efforts here for the club and for the city of Houston and everything. And boy, you folks going out to the West Coast to go see San Diego and the events out there, I'm jealous of that, going in that direction as much as Jason having gone in the other direction. So everybody's and so this is really good. So good interactions tonight. I'm real happy. We'll have another meeting next month in October, again on the second Thursday, and then we'll do the same in November. They're back again. They're on the road again. If you're talking, Randy, we can't quite hear you.
Nope. Thank you for letting us join. This was actually wonderful.
Yeah, this is really good, really good. Glad that the three of you are having an adventure.
We look forward to giving you guys an update when we all get back from the fully charged.
Yeah, we really want to hear how everything went.
I remember correctly, I think.
What'd you say, Emma?
Oh, I was going to say, if I remember correctly, I think John Atwood is.
Yeah, they're flying out. Yes.
Oh, they're flying.
Yes, he's flying out.
Okay.
No, he got a cheap flight and he grabbed it.
Oh, cool.
Well, good. All right. So more reporters to come back and report to us.
We'll have a good Houston representation.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay. Well, we'll wrap it up with that. If there aren't any other questions, either from in the room there or in the car there or out in the ether for folks that are just in little boxes on my screen. But yeah, this has been a great interaction. I appreciate everybody. Thanks for all the help to make this happen here tonight. And see everybody who can make it on Saturday the 24th over at Condit Elementary. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye now.